Good evening. There's been another escalation in the situation in North Korea. They have moved a missile with what's been described as considerable range to the eastern coast of North Korea. And remember, while this weapon is not believed to have the power or range to reach the United States, the U.S. has agreed to protect its allies. Most immediately, that means South Korea and Japan.
North Korea continues to cause unease following reports from South Korea that 2 immediate-range missiles on mobile launchers have been placed and hidden on the east coast of the country. Speculation has centered on the types of missiles deployed. One is believed to be the untested Musudan missile with a range of 3,000 kilometers, while the other is an intercontinental missile that may be capable of reaching outlying U.S. states such as Alaska or Hawaii. North Korea has been involved in a war of words with South Korea and the United States following sanctions imposed on the country for a nuclear test carried out in February. It has threatened to stage a nuclear strike on the United States, attack bases on the island of Guam, and said that the Korean peninsula is in a state of war.
Government officials in Washington have been keeping in close contact with their counterparts in Tokyo and Seoul. State Department spokesperson Victoria Nuland says the U.S. is making moves to defend itself and its allies, South Korea and Japan. She says conflict is not the only option.
We can change course here if the DPRK will begin to come back into compliance with its international obligations, will begin to cool things down.
The context, though, is this. They're untested, and the moment that these things would be fired, the Americans and the South Koreans, who have a large array of military assets in the oceans and on land around South Korea, they would fire back and destroy this thing. So it's very unlikely that anything could actually hit the South Korean mainland or any other targets. Nonetheless, the point is that if North Korea was to press the button and fire these things, America would immediately retaliate, and suddenly this rhetoric and pressure that's been building would get very much higher, and it could escalate a lot more. So this is very worrying, a very worrying development.
Now, the only thing that we have from U.S. sources and South Korean sources is that, yes, there are some movements, but nothing they say that is out of the ordinary. After all, they do these joint military exercises, South Korea and the U.S., every year, as you well know, John. And as a result of that, they're used to monitoring what the North Koreans do. They don't see any massive troop movements. They don't see any massive reaction, but they do see that missile provocation, as a possibility on the horizon. In fact, they also see that North Korea is looking after its main supporter, and that would be China. Yesterday in Pyongyang, there was a ceremony that marked commemorated, I should say, the lives of more than 22,000 Chinese, quote, volunteers who died during the Korean War. It's not called the Korean War by them. It was the war to resist U.S. aggression and aid Korea. The ceremony really does point out a sensitive time. The North Koreans are being very provocative. Beijing, and John, you know this as well as anyone, Beijing is not comfortable with that. If they trigger a war with South Korea, and the U.S., because of its alliances, has to come in and support the South Koreans, where does that leave China? Do they have to come in and support North Korea? Does China then have to engage the United States?
This is the view into North Korea from China's border. All seems quiet for now. These two allies are separated by the Yalu River, but the gulf is widening between them. China has expressed serious concern over the worsening crisis, and it's trying to get a sense of what's going on. Cross-border trade and cultural ties run deep here. This woman says China should support its brother, North Korea. Pyongyang is only developing nuclear weapons to stop it being bullied by others, says this man. So what is that leverage? Well, Beijing, for example, provides vital oil supplies that keeps the tattered North Korean economy ticking over. But China isn't going to pull the plug. Beijing fears that if it drastically cuts support to North Korea, the regime could collapse, leading to a flood of refugees across the border here. But it's also aware that Pyongyang's threats are increasingly drawing America into the region. And China worries that this development could challenge its influence in its own backyard.
On Thursday, North Korea warned of a merciless attack against the United States that could involve nuclear weapons. Pyongyang has also stopped workers from South Korea from going to a jointly run industrial zone along the border. And North Korea has said it will restart the Yangbyon nuclear facility. This would allow it to produce enriched uranium for nuclear weapons.
Nuclear threat is not the game. It's very serious. And it has, I think they have gone too far in their rhetorics. And I'm concerned that if by any misjudgment, by any miscalculations of the situation, if any unwanted crisis happens on the Korean Peninsula, this will have very serious implications.
Для России, как постоянного члена Совета Безопасности ООН,
for Russia, as a permanent member of the Security Council and a signatory to the Non-Proliferation Treaty, such outrageous disregard by Pyongyang of the Security Council resolutions is categorically unacceptable. We're unequivocally convinced that the path to the improvement of the situation in northeastern Asia is not by the escalation of military rhetoric and real military activity, but by joint search for ways to save the situation through diplomacy.